The event went extremely well. It could not have went any better. I was like the whole time, like, I know this is going to really work moving forward because like we didn't have proof of work. And now we have proof of results. Who aren't tech, who aren't, like TradFi people are going to need that if they're TradFi and they get deep enough into Bitcoin, they're going to leave the TradFi Bitcoin part, leave the ETFs, leave MicroStrategy, and they're just going to come directly to spot Bitcoin and then going to need to custody it. And then they're going to, like you said, want to connect to their own node because they're going to want to be in charge of their own transaction.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's the easiest way to show your support and help the podcast grow, bringing great content to even more listeners like you. Plus, subscribing means you'll never miss an episode. And a big shout out to StampSeed for supporting the show. Their indestructible solution is perfect for protecting your Bitcoin seed phrase. Now, let's get to the reason you're here. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Your Bitcoin Story, the podcast where we dive into the journeys, innovations, and insights shaping the Bitcoin ecosystem. I'm your host, Gigi, and today we have an electrifying episode for you. Joining us is John McGraw, the founder of Bitcoin Medellin. If you're not familiar with Bitcoin Medellin, it's a vibrant initiative based in the heart of Colombia, dedicated to fostering education, adoption, and innovation around Bitcoin. John and his team recently celebrated a major milestone, hosting the first annual Bitcoin Medellin Conference this past January. It was an incredible gathering of Bitcoin enthusiasts and thought leaders, and we're thrilled to hear all about the event, its impact, and what's next for the Bitcoin Medellin initiative. John, welcome to the show.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. We're really looking forward to being here. Actually, your podcast is one of my favorite concepts.
Amazing.
In the Bitcoin space. I think it's just, to be like, that's one of the things that when I meet a new Bitcoiner, like I want to hear everyone's story because it is interesting. We're so early and it's so interesting to hear like how did people come to Bitcoin? And so, I just think you have such a great concept here and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to finally be on.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for your kind words, John. And yeah, to me, likewise, ever since I entered the space in 2017, I was always interested about people's like discovery stories. Like, how did you find it? Like, it was more important than the price, of Bitcoin and this and that. Like, it's always about like, how did you uncover it and how has it changed your life? Because to me, Bitcoin, once you discover it, it's a one-way street. There is no going back. It's not like, oh, I've checked it out. It's not for me. I'm out of here. So yeah, it's kind of crucial.
How many people have you ever heard say like, and there are, like, obviously there's like some OG people from the early days that have kind of left. But for the most part, how many people since 2017, anyone who's been around since 2017, I haven't heard any of those people say like, yeah, it wasn't for me and I'm out now.
Yeah, I would also I would contradict that OGs, maybe they left the limelight, but I'm still sure like deep at heart, they're pure Bitcoiners. But like the Antonopoulos of the world, they've kind of been doing it for so long that they're just kind of like, now it's just time to like, that my favorite quote from Satoshi Nakamoto, if you don't have time, if you don't understand it, basically, or like, I'm not here to convince you, sorry, like I don't have the time. So it's that kind of emotion.
That's true. They probably got sick of one, the limelight, and two, also like always constantly having to try to, or doing their best to try to educate people. And finally, I'm sure everyone gets to the point where they try to educate people around them. And then they end up being like, I've tried and, there's only so much you can do. People have to come to it themselves.
True.
Right. I'm sure that's been most people's story is, although someone helped lead them there, they ultimately had to get the conviction themselves to continue down. I heard Jeff Booth obviously spoke with me. So he kind of talked about it as being like a funnel and there's 8 billion people up here at the top and everyone kind of moves to the bottom at their own pace and at their own time.
For sure.
So, it's definitely a good analogy.
And to top it off, we have the 4-year cycle, right? So we always have like the new class of entrants that discover it, that come in and it's all over again. What are wallets? What is cold storage? What is here and there? I guess it's something at the same time, it's also fun, right? Because you get these waves of new people coming in and hopefully sticking to it and not diverging to the whole crypto casino and all of that leveraged game, which in the end, doesn't end very well.
Well, I'm sure the hardcore people always try to save the new people. Obviously, a lot of times it doesn't work. And then, the new people kind of have to feel that financial pain and see their value go down. And then if they go and then if you get smart enough, right? Because a lot of people, they'll look at charts and they'll look at the charts on, a USD pair.
Yeah.
And then, eventually what happens as you become more of a Bitcoiner, you look at things on the BTC pair and you realize, holy cow, like, I didn't just get my shitcoin didn't just get, crucified, on the cross of USD. We got annihilated.
Yeah,
I mean, we absolutely
obliterated
got
versus
eviscerated on
stats.
the BTC. So like what am I doing here? Like, and then, then they all come back. And even myself, I've had that journey,
Me too.
unfortunately, sadly put
Unfortunately.
it. But I think a lot of us have to do that and here's why I think too, is because you come in the space and you go, this is this amazing thing, and you already have you get the conviction about Bitcoin pretty quickly. But then part of the conviction is like, this is an amazing technology, and then so you see these other things that are also utilizing this amazing technology, and you go, like, oh wow, like this thing does this and this thing does that. But then ultimately, this is what I've come to is like, you then go, well, all these things, okay, they are good projects. Not all of them. Some can potentially be good projects, but that's what they are. They're projects, and they're trying to raise money to fund the startup of their project. And because they're not companies and they can't like go become publicly traded company in whatever country they're operating, they do go through this. Well, we're going to issue our own native token that you can buy into, and hopefully you're going to 100x your money or whatever. And so then
Never
that's how
heard
they
that one
kind of
before.
win fund their projects, right? I mean, that's what's, and then because all the tokens are like distributed initially to the insiders, right? And
There's
so
always a pre-mine.
yeah, it's a centralized thing. And I mean, listen, they're just essentially you're buying a pre-IPO where you're raising money so they can run their project and see if it's going to be something, good that could be helpful to the community, to the world. And maybe some of those will be, right? We don't have to like hate the projects. We just have to hate the fact that they're trying to scam us to fund their projects with their shit coins, which are just, just ways to get people to buy into their idea before they would normally be able to, right?
John, the main, I feel like the main objective of all shitcoins is to steal your Bitcoin. That's like the only thing they're
Well,
after.
an opportunity cost, it absolutely is, because that's money you could have invested into Bitcoin, and you should have, because you had already come to Bitcoin at that point. You had just got excited. Well, at least for me and probably many others, you got excited about the technology, and so you thought maybe some of these other things were worthwhile, but then you realize they weren't money, right? They're not money. They're just fundraisers. They're just crowdfunding,
Yeah.
right? For projects. And unfortunately, people don't know that, even though Bitcoin maxis kind of try to tell them like, hey guys, stay away from this. Like, yes, you're as a general like retail person getting into it to try to make money, to try to make an investment, but you're getting bamboozled because you're really not. You're basically crowdfunding projects, and no one would go crowdfund a bunch of projects, you know what I mean, if that's what they really thought it was. But they think it's like Bitcoin because they just haven't figured out yet that there's only one Bitcoin, right? And
For
that's the
sure.
only one that's money. So
For sure.
sorry that we just talked a whole bunch and we
No,
haven't
it was
even like
good. It was good.
gotten
Well,
into
there's no agenda on these recordings. Usually we jump right into it, but it's also nice to kind of a little bit diverge and especially to the new listeners, because we're getting more and more listens on the show. So I have no idea are like hardcore Bitcoiners listening or people that have only entered the space. So it's good to kind of share some side thoughts on it. My just last input before we jump into your story is people usually they learn their lessons when, as you said, when they go through the pain themselves. For example, when we're all young and you get your driver's license, your parents and everybody tells you don't drive fast. But until you crash that car, you don't learn your lesson. I'm guilty of one of those. And the same thing is with Bitcoin, and when you go in, you're like, don't dabble with all of the stuff, but then you're like, oh, but actually, like I can make much more money on these tokens. And then you go and you actually get ruined and you lose whatever you put in there. And then you're like, maybe these maxis actually did have a point, just like your parents when they told you don't speed, you will crash. Maybe I should have listened to their advice. So I guess that's just us humans. We learn through experience.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Well, we're at that point, we're still fiat minded and we're motivated by greed.
Yeah,
So it's we haven't understood that, decentralization and a finite supply with a decreasing reward structure on the issuance. Like we haven't figured out that those are much more important than the actual blockchain
of course.
technology itself, which is important, but those other factors are what differentiate it and make it more, those become more important over time, right? As you become more hardcore
And the
or bit.
fact to add like that we live in an inflationary environment, everything is going up in prices. So everybody's looking to increase their livelihood. We're not living yet in a deflationary, the Jeff Booth world of the price of tomorrow where everything is actually going down. Everything's on the contrary going up. But at some point we will get there. But
Yes.
yeah, John, let's take us back to your origin story. Where does your story begin?
Yeah, so I've actually told my story a bunch of times. So, but that's totally okay though, because I find that I have a story that's different than a lot of Bitcoiners at this point, especially coming. And the funny thing is, there's got to be some other people that have similar stories to me,
Yeah.
but this is how I started. I coached college basketball for about 15 years. I was the athletic director and head women's basketball coach at a junior college, which is a 2-year college here in the United States, in Jacksonville, Florida, back in 2016. I'd heard about Bitcoin a bunch of times, not a bunch, but some here and there, enough to not be like, oh, what is Bitcoin? Like I had a general idea of what it was. So the school I was at tried to get rid of athletics, and essentially they didn't renew my contract, so I was laid off and was considering taking another coaching job in a different city, and decided, long story short, just decided to stay here in Jacksonville. And we were running an event business already anyway, and so we just decided to expand the event business because we were going to have more time now that I wasn't coaching and being the athletic director. I had some. This was my contract ended in June, and the events that we were running every year ended in July. And so in August, I was of 2016. I was kind of just sitting around the house. The next our big event was not till March of the next year. So we had we were going to be in the planning stages for the events, but it was normally up to that point for 15 straight years. In August, I was getting ready for the new freshmen to come into the college and things to get started. So I was pretty busy. So I wasn't too busy. I was kind of sitting around, mulling around the house, kind of a little depressed that I didn't have a lot to do, and was trying to think of some of ideas of how I could make some little money hustling on the side, whatever, some little, thing, that entrepreneurial type of thing I could do. One of those first days sitting on the couch, just at home watching TV, I watched some documentary on Silk Road and the dark web and other stuff like that. And one of the segments was a guy selling Bitcoin, buying it on local Bitcoins and then selling it to people. And he was essentially I don't know. I guess they had found him through a guy who had bought Bitcoin through him. But he was essentially listen, I'm not going on Silk Road buying drugs and then reselling the drugs. I'm reselling Bitcoin, so I'm not doing anything illegal. And as long as I don't ask these people what they're buying the Bitcoin for me, I'm not implicit in what they're doing. I'm just selling Bitcoin to anyone who wants to buy it from me anonymously. So I'm wow, that's a pretty good idea. I bet I could do that. That would be really easy. And he was saying he was making $2,000 a week. Now this was a guy in Brooklyn, so obviously there's a lot more people around, and a much bigger market, but I was I could do that here in Jacksonville. Even if I only made a couple $100 a week, that would be some extra money for my family, at a time where we make money when we run events, right? And I knew I had no event coming up for 7 months, so no cash flow. We were going to be living on what we had made running the events the year before. And in the event business was doing pretty well. We were just probably eventually getting to the point where we had a 6-figure business, low 6-figure business. So, I didn't really have to do another job at that point. We could just survive on that, but the money was coming in in spurts,
Yeah.
every time we have an event, we'd make a good chunk, and then we'd have to go a little while. And then when we got to the end of July until March, we'd have nothing. So I was kind of looking for a little cash flow. So I went right away that day. I was this is a great idea. Right away, I jumped off the couch. I have something. I can do now. So I went and I found local Bitcoins online. I kind of figured out how it worked. I was really nervous because they wanted me to go to a bank and deposit money into someone's bank account and then like take a selfie with like holding my ID up next to my head and then holding up a bank receipt of me depositing the money in their account. So I kind of figured it out, and I like did a really small one first for like maybe bought $100, but the price of Bitcoin that day was like 600. So I bought like maybe $100 worth, and I didn't have any issues. And I kind of told my wife what I was doing, and she was like, be careful, we don't get scammed. And I'm like, I know this is kind of crazy. So anyway, I ended up buying like 5 Bitcoin, I think that day, something like that, and went online onto a bunch of different places like Craigslist and places like that, and just advertised like, hey, I'm selling Bitcoin. At that point, you were around in 2017. I don't think anyone was even using the terminology KYC back then. Do you remember?
It was like the early days, because I remember when I started in the summer of 2017, Binance was only introducing the whole concept of KYCs and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Were they
until
even
then,
using those letters though? I don't remember, but I just
yeah.
remember like, I was advertising I was selling it anonymously. That's
Mm.
how I was phrasing it. So I had one guy buy from me starting almost right away. And so for about 5 or 6 straight weeks, he would buy like $100 or $125 worth of Bitcoin for me. And I'd mark it up like if I was selling him, well, if I would sell, I'd give him like $100 for $125 in
Mm-hmm.
cash. And then, he would also pay like a $10 or $20 like fee for me delivering it, like
Mm-hmm.
meeting him somewhere and him buying it from me like directly off our phone. And so like over the course of those 5 weeks though, or 6 weeks, I didn't get any other customers. I had no one else. So, and at the same time, like, again, this was like around the end of August, like the price really moved from like $600 to like 1,200. Like basically the price of Bitcoin doubled. I mean, my initial amount of money doubled. And I just thought like, why? So here's the last straw. The last straw with this guy was he calls me up at 9 o'clock and says, hey, can you meet me at this Burger King? So I look, it's on the other side of town. You may not know, Jacksonville, Florida is the biggest like city by land area in the United States.
How
It's the
many hours
largest.
drive was it?
It was like a good hour to
Okay.
where he was from where I was. So I drove the hour. I got there about 10, met the guy. And instead of sending him 0.1 Bitcoin, I sent him a Bitcoin, a whole Bitcoin. So, and now at that time, that was like $1,000.
That's
But
100K plus today.
obviously, I wasn't going to give him Bitcoin for $100. So I told him like, hey, we have to wait for it. Back then, there was no Lightning either, so like everything was.
No
So we had to
mempool.
wait. We had to wait for it to all confirm on the blockchain, and then he had to send me 0.9 back. Which at that time, like, again, these are the very first Bitcoin transactions I'm even making. So like, I don't even understand the technologies. Like, I'm waiting. So once he sends it back to me, now I'm waiting for it to confirm all 6 confirmations on the blockchain.
Wow.
Not knowing, like, after it confirms once, like, we're good and I'm good and I can start driving back to my house. So but by the time it confirms for him and then he sends it back to me and it confirms fully for me, it's like an hour and a half of me sitting there with this guy. So now it's like 11:30 at night. And then I still have to drive back to my house another hour.
This is
So I get
PM we're
home.
talking about.
Yeah, it's
Oh, wow.
almost 1 a.m. now, and like in the middle of the night. And I end up making like $25 probably, and also knowing that the price of Bitcoin has almost doubled in that time. And my wife and my best friend had come for a ride with me at the time, and both him and my wife, when we got back, were like, this is
Too much.
ridiculous. A guy who makes 6 figures, like $100,000 a year, is driving around to make $25 in the middle of the night and for 4 hours. Like, this is stupid. And in my mind, I'm going, and they're not even thinking about the price of Bitcoin, but in my mind, I'm going, had I just hung on to all the stuff that I had even sold this guy, this twit that I had to meet in the middle of the night, like, the value of my account would be way more than the few measly $25 to $40 I made each time I transacted with them in fiat dollars.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is just totally stupid of me to continue to do this. And then at that point, I really started going down the rabbit hole pretty hard and, essentially figured it out. And then, of course, then got into the shit coins a little bit that we talked about here in 2017,
You went down
2018.
the ICO craze train.
And I did. Oh man, I got smoked pretty hard. And so I just, really understood it pretty well and just continued on the path and kind of just stacked sats in isolation really for a long time and didn't really think about like going to conferences or events or meeting other Bitcoiners. It was just something, that
Your own
seemed
little
like a
thing.
yeah, and then that like it was, oh gosh, I remember like 2021 just being like in my house, but obviously not having anyone else to really like celebrate with. And I think that's around the time when I was like, I really need to go to some of these things because, like
Time to
I've been
socialize.
involved in this and yeah, and I don't know any of these people. And, part of it was like, I'm not in their world. Like I'm not TradFi person, I'm not a tech person. I'm not a developer. So like, none of the I wasn't in the same world as any of those people, and so and in TradFi really to at that point hadn't really come to it yet either. But I also wasn't at that point like a libertarian type person. I wasn't in any of those same worlds, so so I didn't know anyone who was a Bitcoiner at all, and I wasn't even up until about 21. I wasn't even following any of it on Twitter at all. I wasn't on, even though I had a huge following on Twitter from my event company,
Mm.
right? I think my Twitter is like up to like maybe like 37,000
Oh,
followers on
wow.
my event page or on my like event planning Twitter. So yeah, we have a huge fun, and so I'm on Twitter a lot, but I didn't even know like Bitcoin Twitter until like 2021.
Mm.
And then I found that, and then of course I started finding the conferences and like going to like Bitcoin Miami and going to some of
Which
these
one
other
was your
things.
first conference that you went to? Bitcoin only.
I think it was Bitcoin Miami,
In
and it was
22
either
or
it was
21?
either 21 or 22. I think it was 22 because I think the first time I went it was massive. So I
Okay,
think
probably
21 was
22.
really small. Yeah, I don't think I went to that one. So yeah, 22, it was massive. And that one really made me feel like, wow, like I can't believe there's all these other people that
It's not
would
just
like
me.
care this much. Well, right. Like, I mean, I knew it wasn't just me, but that would care enough to go travel to Miami to go to this thing, like all over the world and all over the US and just so many. It was the amount of people and where people were from, which blew me away. Like I knew there was tons of other people, but not that would care enough to travel that far, that many.
Mm.
So that really blew me away. Like I remember like taking some pictures there of like just the huge crowds and sending it to my wife and being like, wow, like that really pushed my conviction
Mm.
forward a ton just going to that in 22. Even though like by that time in 22 we were already like in the bear market, right? So
But nonetheless, the people were there.
and I had been through like obviously by that time that was like going on my I had been to two full bull markets and two full or that was like the beginning of my second bear market. So I mean I was already pretty strongly convicted, but that like pushed me like super far over the edge. Like after that I was just like after that I was literally stacking as hard as I could,
Mm.
which it's I think we all probably go through this like, man, I wish I was stacking as hard as I could from 2016 to 2020.
Yep.
Like I mean I stacked but like not anywhere near to the level that I could have. And then in 22, like from 22 to now it's been like just every single available penny just goes to Bitcoin right away, and then, we just work off of what comes in that we need, and anything extra is just like Bitcoin.
Yep.
So,
Well, don't feel bad,
but
John.
yeah,
If I may just jump in, like there's still people that aren't stacking today, and there's still people in the future that won't be stacking at some point. Recently, I listened to
yeah,
an episode with American Huddle. I think it was on Walker's podcast where he said, "Don't feel bad about." Or I think it was Madex that mentioned it. He said, "Don't feel bad about like you not stacking hard enough. Think of the children that are not here and born. They can't even stack yet." So it was like, okay, there's some
yeah.
perspective
Well,
there.
that's crazy. I think, there's an adage that I hear a lot, and I actually just corrected someone on Twitter who said it the other day, like, like Bitcoin is for anyone. Bitcoin isn't for everyone. I mean, like, unfortunately, that's unfortunately we created and we're monetizing this asset, but like it's the people that are here to monetize it who are going to be the people who own it and are rewarded and are able to, utilize that asset. But eventually it's going to get too big where average people just holding it like me and you is going to be really uncommon, except for the people who stacked it early like we did and then passed it down to our future generations. But, unfortunately, for the rest of the world, we're just going to get to a point where average people, are not stacking base layer Bitcoin. They're working within a system like
And getting paid in
Lightning or
Bitcoin instead of stacking it. They're accepting it.
yeah, sure. I mean, but they'll probably receive most of that like in Lightning or, a Liquid or Fetty or, some other tier because I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, I think that's like once we get, further in the future when we're talking about, the Bitcoin is monetized considerably more.
Hmm.
Of course, there's this transition area where we're in right now where it's a little bit chaotic and, the price fluctuates so much. But once it becomes, I don't want to say fully monetized, but when we get closer to that point, I don't know that people will even be able to get paid in base chain the Bitcoin because
It won't make sense. To be honest, you know
it
how I
won't make
see it, John? Like I see it, the main chain will always kind of be like the final settlement layer where like, governments, companies, they like hold that as the reserve. And also for individuals, if you have a substantial amount of sats on, as you said, Lightning, Liquid, Arc, whatever layer twos there'll be around, once you get to a certain amount, like let's say 1 million, 5 million sats, or even less, let's say 1 million sats, you withdraw that to your on-chain address and you just keep it there. So you have it as your savings account. And then like your current account is the Lightning, the stuff that you actually interact with every day. That's how I personally see it, but I might be wrong.
No, I think I think my vision aligns with how you're currently seeing it as well. So 'cause I think ultimately, right, like we're going to have ultimately like we'll have potentially a kind of some like UTXO guidelines where where everyone who's operating on base chain is going to know like we not you can't, there's a minimum number of sats for a base chain transaction,
Yeah.
right? Like we're going to get to where that's kind of like a guidelines or the official guidelines or unwritten guidelines or whatever it's going to be of there you can we should only be moving, and right now I think I try to keep all my UTXO sets at about a million sats or more, right? So and then I have my primary long-term savings, which is a much larger UTXO than that. So and I think just for purposes of easily being able to move it, we need to probably people need to think about. I think that's a long-term thing that people need to consider. And that's why I don't think it's for everyone, but it can be for anyone. So I think that's the most
True.
important thing, right?
True. Awesome. Well, you are right, John. I don't think we've had a guest yet. I know some people personally who kind of started their journey with OTC. I had a good friend back in Cyprus where I lived. He was actually my partner in one of my first ventures, and he used to do OTC back, I think, maybe even like a year or two before you. End of 2014, 15, he was doing OTC in Australia. And I was kind of like, wow, like back then, like how was that? And ever since then, like, I've never had a guest come on the show and share their story through that. So I found that very unique.
Yeah, it just, I mean, golly, I mean, it was one of those things, like I say all the time, like we stumbled into it. I
Yeah.
mean, we fell into it. It was, I don't want to say accidental, but it was very random how we came to it at the time we did.
Hmm.
And we were looking for things like to do to make money, and so like it just worked out really fortunate for us. And I mean, one of the things that I think really helped was the price going up right away as we were getting into it. Like really, like, I mean, of course, if your money doubles right in like 2 or 3 month period of time, you're pretty excited, even if it's a small amount of money. And like you're excited and interested, like it piques your interest. Like, why did my money just double? How did this happen? Like what factors are making this happen? And so it was easy entrance to the rabbit hole. It was easy to like want to learn about something that was like enriching me very quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was probably that factor really probably helped push me in more than, but again, like I said, I mean, I wasn't stacking anywhere near as hard as I could have. And I, of course, could have accumulated a significant amount more had I been even, to where I am now. Right. I mean, so, but, I don't think you ever stop buying, and it does always feel expensive. Right. Like there's never a time it
100%.
doesn't feel expensive, but I just bought I've bought some, I've bought a number of times on the dips here into the 90s.
Mm.
And so those are my first time buying over 70. So I never bought in the 80s. We passed the 80s too quick. So, but I haven't bought in the hundreds yet, but I know I will. Like that day is coming here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Because I mean, do you think you'll ever stop buying as long as you can?
Well, I personally live on like a Bitcoin standard for probably this is going into my 4th year now. Like I get, which I don't recommend to anyone listening. Like it's not like a secret. Like it's up to you what's your risk tolerance. But to me, like as you said, John, like similarly, I've been like DCing and stacking like probably since 2020 when we like had that big final bottom dip of like four.
Yep.
Since then, around the 15K and 2 years ago when we were at 16,000 January of 2023, like all my last, I even had some inheritance from my grandparents. I went like crazy. And since then I've been like going super hard. And I came to a point where even like my salary before I left my 9 to 5 job, I was getting paid in USDT twice a month. It was basically on an American standard. And that USDT lands every 2 weeks. And I went straight into BTC. And I would basically, my thing is I just basically sell a little bit every week, every Monday or Wednesday for whatever expenses I have. And if there's something that's upcoming that I know I have a big expense, I wait for like, call it a good price. Like when we're like really pumping, at some point we need to retract. So at those points, I set a little bit more, but I've been essentially just living off my stack. And I'm not one of those guys, which is like, I buy Bitcoin and I'm never selling it. Like at the end of the day, it is money. It's here to be utilized, and
Yeah.
and you never know when you're
100%.
going to go, like tomorrow I might walk out, go on my dog walk and a bus hits me. And it's like, I was stacking all those years for what? A quick message from our awesome partners at StampSeed. Future you is dependent on you. Don't let them down. Future you is set for life with Bitcoin, but only if you back up your seed phrase properly. No napkins, no phone notes, just StampSeed. Fireproof, waterproof, life-proof. Use BTC Story for 15% off at stampseed.com. Future you just fist bumped you. Don't mess this up. And now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. No, I mean, to live, to have time, right? To have
True.
time and choice.
Yeah.
Right. Time and choice. That's what you're stacking for. And I think like, that's amazing. Like I super commend you. Like that is absolutely incredible. Like, more power to you. I mean, it's for me, like
So I've been buying over
I,
100K to answer your question.
yeah, sure. No, I mean, because do you? Sorry for me prying here. Like,
No, for sure.
is your cash flow coming in Bitcoin? Do you have cash flow?
I don't have. Well, I'm starting to now since I've gone full time into the podcast, and I'm actually launching. So when this episode comes out in February, it's already going to be announced. So maybe I can share it now. My next gig to actually make an income, because at the moment now I'm fully, since there's no like income coming in, I'm fully just living off the stack.
Okay.
So my like DCA going forward will be, I think, a good thing, which is I started by orange seeding people with these episodes, and I will do so for foreseeable future. But I also want to take the next step of helping people get their Bitcoin into self-custody. I think that's super crucial.
Yep.
There is so many courses, so many books out there, so many podcasts. But at the end of the day, some people, and especially the older generations, for example, like my parents would never go watch a YouTube video to see how to do it. Like I realized like there's some people, and younger is also, it's not just people older, that would like that service of handheld solutions. And it seems to be like a growing every year. There's more and more people that want it because there's like many of these advisory and mentoring services out there by some big people in the space. And every few months, they're getting more and more advisors on. So clearly there is demand, because if there would be no demand, they wouldn't be expanding. And instead of joining one of them and being just another number in an agency, I'm cross promoting. So people listening to the show, if you want Gigi's help, not someone else, but like someone that you listen to on a weekly basis, we can actually set up, a call, and I can lead you through, full baby steps at your own pace, your own, flexible timeframes. Get your Bitcoin into cold storage, explain the different options that you have, different setups. Especially when you go into like multi-signature, that might seem like super complex, and multi-signature is not for everyone. Like, it really depends on the case that you have. And then kind of the semi-final thing where I want to finish it is getting people to run their own nodes, because we need more people running nodes to strengthen the network, but more importantly, to have full control over the transactions. When you want to do a transaction, you kind of minimize the exposure, so you kind of have it the private as you can, and you know that you have control over your transactions. Because if you're connecting to someone else's node, you have no idea who they are, who are they sharing those transactions with. And to be honest, today it's so easy to set up a node. I remember I set up my first node about 3 years ago with Umbrel, and it was a little bit clunky, and it didn't work, and it was off, and it was troubleshooting this, that. And then about like 6 months ago, I did a DIY job of building my own Start9 node. And I'm not techie at all, but like, it was so easy. And I'm actually in the process of creating a tutorial of how to do it for people that want to, the pure cypherpunks that want to do it themselves.
Great. Yeah.
It's so easier. If you don't want to dabble with that, if you just want to buy a unit, click play and play, like, you can just get a Start9 node directly from them, and it's so easy. So that's
I actually did that.
There you go, right? Super simple.
But here's the thing, and why this is amazing that you're doing that. And we probably do need more people, because I do see others obviously doing the same type of thing. But I don't think, I agree. Like, it's not like the market is oversaturated. We need some of these people, because like, you're going to have more people like me. Like, just think about this. I've been in Bitcoin since 2016, before you even, right? By a couple months, probably.
By a year, probably.
I've always wanted to run a node, but I've been scared to death. So, but finally the other day, I just said, like, the hell with it. Like, I've been around too long, and I know too much about Bitcoin to not be doing my part. And goddamn, I'm going to run a node. So I don't care if I don't know how to do it, or I'm just like some, redneck Southerner, right? I'm going to go out here and run a node. So I'm actually a Northerner. I was born in the North. But I'm like, adopted Southerner. So, all right. So anyway, I ordered a server pure from Start9. Very, like, the nicest one they had.
The most secure one.
Send the money, I might as well get the best, right? If I'm going to do it, and I'm an idiot anyway, if I get the best one, at least probably be the easiest one to use too, right? So I got the best one, and I set it up, and I'm running my own node. As we speak here, I am connected. Yep, my Bitcoin core is up and running, it says. So I'm up and running. Here's the problem. I haven't figured out how to connect to my own node yet. So I got to get there on my own, which I haven't been able to do on. So like it.
Well, we can do it. I'm here to help you. I'm not going to sell my service. I'll give you a free set to get you connected to the node.
So look, it's 26. I'm around since 2016, and I'm just doing this now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just doing this now. There's going to be, how many more like normies like me are going to come to Bitcoin? Like, people who aren't tech, who aren't, like TradFi people are going to need that. If they're TradFi and they get deep enough into Bitcoin, they're going to leave the TradFi Bitcoin part, leave the ETFs, leave MicroStrategy, and they're just going to come directly to spot Bitcoin, and then going to need to custody it. And then they're going to, like you said, want to connect to their own node because they're going to want to be in charge of their own transactions, right? So, I mean, like, I know this, I just don't know how to do it. So, but like, they're going to eventually come to that too. And it's going to be a growing number of people, because listen, let's be realistic. If you're a coder or a developer, like, you've known about Bitcoin for a very long time, and you've either come over or you haven't. And if you haven't at this point, are you really going to ever come over to Bitcoin? I mean, like, so
how long will it take?
The people who are going to have the know how to do these things, if they're Bitcoiners, like, those days are probably gone. Like, they either already are or they're not. And everyone coming new is going to be a new person who needs these type of things, how to self-custody, and even not just self-custody, but
UTXO management, which you mentioned as well. Most people don't UTXO manage, which is crazy. They DCA weekly or like even daily, like these 10,000 sats.
Imagine the people that were DCAing back in 2020, 2021, who then everyone was going self-custody, not
withdrawing.
and they're withdrawing every DCA of $50.
Mm,
Man, those people are in trouble,
yeah. I
aren't they?
I just tweeted earlier today. I think my first tweet of the day was I woke up. I needed to consolidate some of mine and my parents' UTXOs because my parents are lucky to have a good Bitcoin manager. I was waiting for the 1 SAT VByte fees. And this morning, that they were going on for hours. There were 1 SAT VByte fees,
Nice.
and I was like, I first did what I had to do. And then once that was done, I was like, Twitter, I need to share. I was like, guys, attention. This is the prices when you need to, consolidate your UTXOs. And then I put a
Yeah.
little plug in. I was like, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, DM me, let me help you out. Because at some point when fees will go up to what we saw, especially during the ordinal times and in the future when there's going to be so many more transactions, when it's going to be like 200, 300, sats per VByte, my God, those $50 DCAs, they'll be dust. They'll be unspendable UTXOs, which most people have no idea about, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, thanks for the donation, right, to our Bitcoin.
True.
That's what it is. I don't know. You hope sometime in the future they find a way to kind of fix that and maybe, enable that to be resolved somehow. I don't know. But, I just think man, it's a real bummer for people who weren't educated on that, who were trying, especially because they were trying to do the right thing, right? Because if you didn't understand UTXOs back then, which admittedly I didn't, thank God, just like most of mine just thank God were, because, I don't know. I was just very fortunate. I moved a bunch of stuff at once. So it just worked out for me, just because joining stuff over the years and then kind of moving into cold storage. Being a Bitcoiner from 2016, I didn't even cold storage my stuff until 2020 or 2021 myself.
Everything was on a hot wallet.
Yeah, no, I just kept everything on an exchange like a
Wow.
regular normie would. But, and of course I knew not your keys, not your coins back in probably 2018, 2019.
Was an FTX though, right?
Oh, thank God, Coinbase. I'm an
Nice.
American. It's just, again, being in Bitcoin since 2016 and not knowing anything, it's like Coinbase, right? That's what, your average person is going to feel comfortable with, first and foremost.
What works, you stick with it.
Yeah, it's just like in America, we have these products that are we all know they suck, but right, we use them all the time. Walmart,
True.
McDonald's. Right, they're all awful, right? And but they're these huge corporations, and they become ubiquitous, and we know them, and so that's what we use,
100%.
right? Because it's comfortable. So, in Coinbase is it's the Walmart and McDonald's of crypto, right?
True.
Of Bitcoin.
True.
But yeah, I just kept my stuff there because it was easy, and because again, I always figured well, it's kind of protected there, right? If something happens to Coinbase, I'll probably be insured. They're an American company, as opposed to keeping it on Binance, where I'm oh, I could be screwed. They're not Americans. They could just tell me go fuck myself, right?
Yeah.
And then and I do.
So I kind of liked that Binance part. Binance was my first exchange. I liked it because they had no HQ. It was kind of this we're everywhere type of thing. But from the beginning, I used to my first cold storage was a ledger. So probably about I got into self-custody super fast. I don't know what it was, but maybe it was December. So I started my journey end of September, beginning of November was when I actually launched the first it was called Universal Crypto. It was crypto blockchain consultancy about helping people to figure out what the hell this technology is all about. And everybody wanted to do their own little token launch about bananas and everything, but nobody really knew how to get it started. For people that want to hear how Gigi started, you can go to episode 1, the Genesis episode, so you can hear essentially my shitcoinery start. But that December, so 3 months in, one of my closest friends who's an IT nerd guy, he gifted me a nano ledger, and from that on, every time I would buy on Binance, they would be straight to cold storage. After Binance, FTX was my regular exchange because those guys had the lowest withdrawal Bitcoin fees, right? Because I was DCA in a few $100, let's say, a month.
Yeah.
And to me, Binance was about $50 to withdraw. So imagine I'd buy $200 and I'm paying 25% just for fees. And then FTX was $5 or something like that. It was huge difference. But I was really happy when FTX went down, because then suddenly my trading history went up in smoke. I was like, amazing. Like, who cares the fact that I did KYC on it? It was gone. And then I went down the whole route of buying non-KYC and hodl, and now with RoboSats and Peach and all these other ways that we have. So like FTX was a fun run. And actually I had an interaction with SBR, with Sam, because we were setting up a corporate account on it. And we messed up. We did a typo in the email registration and we submitted the ticket. And Sam in Telegram DM'd me. And yeah, he solved the problem within 30 minutes. I still have this chat in my Telegram saved. Like him or don't, but like the guy was like, I don't know what he was on. He was like, hey, are you there? Like, can you check this? And then like I didn't reply in like 5 minutes. And he was like, oh yeah, found it. Oh, you did the typo here. It's done. And I'm like, wow. And I was like, you're a CEO? Like, man, kudos to you. Like I praised him. Little did I know, 2 years later.
He does. I can appreciate that from the guy for sure. He definitely seemed like
he put in the work.
He was willing to just work 24 hours a day, right?
True.
He was working on scamming us, but.
Well, there's also I think with all these big projects and big people, there's always someone behind them feeding them what to do. Like, I don't think he was that bad. I think that was just he was pushed by someone to do it to kind of, I don't know, jeopardize the market or whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. That's a story for another time. But just generally, it's going back to the self-custody part. Anyone listening, if you still have any over $100 worth of Bitcoin on any exchange after this episode, please do yourself a favor, not me, but yourself. Go and withdraw it. And if you don't know how to, Gigi is now here to help you out. Self-custody is a crucial part. So that was a long answer to the DCA part. So yeah, I'm looking now to be adding to my stack and keeping it by basically offering the service, of course, charging a fee. Because I would love to do it for free, but I've got 2 young daughters. I need to make some money, and there's 2 pathways. There's mega sponsorship, have 15 minutes of promoting other people's stuff, or promote myself by actually giving people the good help. Now in the beginning, we are working with StampSeed, which are amazing guys, and I use their product for because I think it's also vital with seed phrases, just as much as self-custody. Preserving your seed phrase is on par with self-custody, because if you lose your wallet or it stops working and you don't have your seed phrase, man, you're screwed. You, once again, as you said, John, thanks for the donation. You need to keep that safe. I'm happy to align with companies that I actually use. There's no pitching me to do some whatever crypto casino. I would never endorse that. So companies that I'm aligned with, I'm more than happy. BTC Pay Server, there's no donations, but I'm happy to promote them on every episode. Seed Signer, one of my absolute hardware wallets. I'm always shilling them and always putting in a good word. Companies that I align with, I'm more than happy to promote them even for free, because it's all about promoting the best product. I'm not here just to make a buck. I'm here to help you become a self-sovereign individual. That's my goal in my lifetime. So
sure, right. I mean, listen, you're totally within your bounds to want to have a fee for what you're doing, because you're providing value for others, and so that value is worth something, right? I mean, so ultimately, I think that's awesome, and I agree also with your sentiment here about the sponsorships at in Medellín this year. We kind of gifted sponsorships to a couple different people who were kind of willing to help out and be part of the event. So it was we'll call you a sponsor, even though you didn't technically
pay, but they contributed in other ways.
Okay, yeah, you contributed in other ways, and that was good enough. So because we needed those things to get the event off the ground.
100%. Well, I did 2 events, and after this question, I swear we're going to get onto the Bitcoin Medellin, because we went on a tangent, but I like where this conversation is going. Just before we go into it, I have my own experience, which I think you'll find interesting, John, and the listeners who are you listeners joining to the show. So in 2017, when I started my venture with the Universal Crypto, and it was a whole ICO craze, I actually did my own event in Cyprus with having 0 experience. I was back then, actually, I'm going to dox my age. I was young 20s. And, there was this whole craze with ICOs, and we were sitting. I started this company with just myself, 1st of November 2017, and 6 months later, we were 8 partners. Like I grew it to 8 partners. I didn't have employees because I couldn't really pay anyone. But I said, hey, if you're going to come on and contribute, I'll make you an equal partner. So like we had equal shares between everyone, even though I was the founder and I provided an office where we worked for. I went like full decentralized, like everyone gets an equal split. Terrible mistake, but anyways, we live and we learn. And we were sitting with the partners, and I was like, guys, wouldn't it be amazing to do an ICO battle instead of having these people talk on Twitter and show their stuff? They come on a stage and they actually, battle each other about why their token is significant, better than the other one. Little did we know, from the minute we were sitting around the round table in our office, 6 weeks later, we held the event. 6 weeks, not 6 months. And we were expecting to have around, and this is Cyprus, a tiny little island in the Mediterranean with like, together, it's like 1 million people on the island. We were expecting like to have maybe 200, 300 people. In the 2 days, we had over 2,000 people. We basically booked out this like hall in a hotel, in this touristy hotel. And like, it was just filled with people, like, and we couldn't believe it. And I orchestrated the thing, dealt with all the sponsorships. I know exactly how it is with the sponsorships, got the speakers, and in the end, emceed the whole 2 days because I didn't even have time to find someone to do it. It was probably the most stressful thing I ever did in my life, and such a short period, like 6 weeks. That's a month and a half. Like,
oh, that's nothing.
Like it was insanity. Like it was just beyond. It was up to the last minute, moving the schedule around and everything. But like people loved it. And then I was high on my own supply, and I was like, you know what? It was pretty crazy, but like, let's keep this going. So we decided to do the next one the following February. We were like, if we did such a success in 6 weeks, we'll do one 6 months out and make it extra good. But we didn't account to the bear market because that was my first proper bear market. And so we steered away. I was already going deeper down my rabbit hole. We steered away from the ACOs. It was more focused on Bitcoin. Well, some still shitcoinery, but more like Bitcoin. And we called it Nakamoto's Den. So it was like Shark Tank. Like my vision was to have these investors and VCs and angel sitting in a panel and having like people come out instead of battling, but pitching to these investors and the audience. And on that one, we went crazy. We booked out like the biggest venue in town for like that could accommodate a few thousand people. And in the end, long story short, we had like over the 2 days, we had maybe like 500, 600 people turn out, and we got like super indebted to the venue and everything. And just like, it went like, and that was my end with events. I was like, listen, first time it was beginner's luck. Second time, I really tasted the real how it is. It doesn't always go to your plan. And then I stayed away with the events. But I think that's a nice segue to congratulate you, first of all, John, with the first Bitcoin Medellin Conference, and tell us all about it and how, like, I guess what inspired you to do your own Bitcoin event, and specifically in Medellin, not like US Jacksonville or something.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk. I can give you kind of the background here about what inspired me here. You'll probably love this. I have a feeling you're going to. There's also a possibility that you're going to hate this, and you're
there's a bunch of listeners, so maybe they'll love it too.
So we're gonna do the fork in the road for them too.
Okay.
Like they're probably gonna love this, but some of them may end up like, yeah, I don't know, I don't like that guy very much. So this is what kind of inspired me to get. So I started going to the conferences, right? And once I went to that first one in Miami, I loved it. Pretty much tried to go to anything else, like meetups, anything that I could. I'm like, this is great. I'm networking with Bitcoiners now. These are my people. This is my world, right? Like the whole cult, right? Thing. So
cult without
I really
a leader.
enjoyed it. Yeah, exactly. So, exactly. Rules without rulers. So finally I got to the point where I said, like, told my wife, like, hey, we're in this together, and I keep going to these conferences by myself. And, you need to learn more about Bitcoin. You need to like be as convicted as I am about it. You need to be on board because, we're a family, and, this is our stack. Realistically, this is our families, hopefully our generational stack right here. So I'm like, you should know what's going on. And realistically, the kids should too. And my kids are just getting to like My oldest is 19. So they're like just getting to the age where they could care. And so I said, hey, there's a conference in Amsterdam. It's Bitcoin Amsterdam. These guys put the conference on in Miami. So I'm sure there'll be a ton of people there. And so this was in the bear market, like in 23, I think. And so there was no one there. It was like 1,000 people. But here's what really motivated me. I got my wife out there. I got her super juiced up, and I'm thinking like, this is going to be great. We're going to listen to like Jeff Booth or James Lavish or like someone talking about like debt spirals or Larry Lepard. And like, my wife is going to understand like, yeah, I feel inflation and I feel these things. And like, she's going to be 100% on board. No, that's not what happened at all. They literally talked about ordinals and cosmic cats. And I mean, I'm like, holy cow, like, what is this? Like all this shit coining on Bitcoin. How is my wife supposed to understand why Bitcoin is important when they're talking about these like stupid NFTs on Bitcoin? I'm like, this is so dumb. And on top of that, like started kind of learning more about UTXO management. I'm like, and it's causing our fees to go up. Like this whole thing, like Bitcoin is supposed to be money for anyone. And now anyone can't use it because the fees are so high, and so it just really kind of pissed me off, the whole ordinals thing. And I just was like, you know what? I don't want to hear about this. Like people that need Bitcoin, people that Bitcoin is for, like it's obviously for anyone, but like the people on the bottom who need it, like they need to know Bitcoin as money, and there needs to be more education for these people that need it, right? And the people in the places that are like not, like the United States, Europe, Australia, like great, these first world countries, like it's good for us to have Bitcoin, right? Like we understand why, but like people that really, really, really need it, especially to protect them against currency debasement and like other potential like issues that go on, especially in the global south, right? So I just like thought like, I at that point kind of moved me from being like a Bitcoiner to like a money maximalist Bitcoiner, right? Like this is money. This isn't this other, BS. Which to just go a little ahead, when I ended up getting Knut Spanholm as
I love
a
Knut.
speaker, he said, let's get on a call or whatever. Or I said, let's get on a call. And we had a little Zoom kind of like this almost, but without listeners. And we really connected because I think he feels really strongly the same way I do about like, because I saw he did a tweet the other day about like, well, if you go buy 10 pairs of socks at the store, and it just really was, I can't remember how it went, but it was exactly like kind of how I feel about it too. So, at that point I was like, we should really, we're event planners, and, kind of listening to Jeff Booth a lot and having read Price It Tomorrow. I was like, we're operating like in the fiat system, running fiat events. And, not that that's really probably going to change for me because I've created such a good business over there. But, like I was like, I should take what I do and try to utilize that inside the Bitcoin system, inside the Bitcoin community, and run an event. And also like where we're spending time where we're talking about like educating people, and we're not like
Here to
wasting all
sell them
this time
stuff, JPEGs.
yeah, and probably some of the thing for those guys is, and of course, they do a great job, like the Bitcoin conference people. Their production is fabulous. They do have a lot of really good speakers. They put on a first class event. They do a great job marketing. They do all those things. And I'm sure over time, how many conferences have they run now? I'm sure there's some push to like have different content and different stuff. And I'm sure they're financially somewhat motivated by
Percent.
ordinals and fees going up, and miners, because miners are benefiting from fees going up too. And that's all their sponsors are miners and, some of this ordinal stuff. And so, I'm sure there's financial motivation and incentives and also to, content incentives to provide different type of content. But for me, I was like, man, I think like I'd much rather hear about macro conditions, and why things are happening, like why things are breaking or why this is happening for the third time than hear about quantum cats once. So that was kind of my motivation. I'm probably not a super popular person at Bitcoin Magazine. Like they're probably not inviting me to speak in Vegas, and whatever, that's fine. I mean, I
But
don't
that's
care.
fine too, right? Like we're free to choose
Yeah.
where we want to go.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll totally go, and because they'll have great speakers that I care about and whatever. It's whatever. I know some people are kind of like saying like now that because the whole Trump coin, like not going to support them anymore or whatever. And I don't even look at it like that. I don't look at it as supporting them. I look at it as like I'm going out there because it's going to be great networking opportunity, and they're
You
going
go there
to
for the
they
people, not actually for the company that puts up the event.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't, and we don't always have to agree with like look, it's good if we don't always like we always just agree with every single thing. Then like if I and especially like for your podcast too, if I come on here and just say like, hey, we agree and we're just, having a
Yeah.
great time, like the controversial ones, I'm sure get a lot more views.
Yeah.
I actually used to do a basketball podcast, and when we do controversial stuff, like the views would be X what they'd be if we all just got along,
100%.
So, so I think it's good for that. But no, I mean, no, it's really the way it's really what motivated me to do it. And then part of the reason we picked Medellin, like, like there's already a great movement in Africa, and they have Bitcoin Africa. My wife is from Kenya. So
Mm.
we actually thought about Africa and
Oh,
doing it
wow.
in Kenya. But they had, this year it was in Nairobi. So we just, we wanted to be respectful of what they're doing and
Yeah.
what they've done out
I
there.
had
And we
Master
just,
Guantai on like a year ago, so he told me a lot about
yeah,
what was happening in Kenya and generally in the whole
great dude.
continent of
Yeah. Yeah.
Africa. Amazing.
Really good dude.
Yeah.
I've hung out with him in person before in
Amazing.
Nairobi. So we just said, where can we do one where we're kind of not stepping on anyone's toes, and where we can kind of start something that no one like that it's not looking like we're piggybacking on anyone or copying anyone. We're like coming out here like fresh out the box, doing our own new thing. And and we had been to Medellin a bunch of times. It's a beautiful, amazing city. Like
It looks like
the
it.
John McGraw ranking of worldwide cities is, and I can only rank places I've been. So there's been a lot of places I haven't, but I've been to a lot of Europe, all over the North America. But my number one ranking right now is Medellin number one, Nairobi number two. So Medellin is a beautiful, amazing, mountainous city with the most beautiful weather. Does never changes year round. It's the same weather. It's called the City of Eternal Spring. It's just incredible. So I said, there's a lot of modern. It's like a modern international city. So like the amenities there and the facilities there are great, and like things are really affordable there too. And so I knew, and also I knew there was like a digital nomad community there, a pretty big one, a really entrepreneurial spirit in that city. And I figured there's got to be some Bitcoiners there too, if both of those things are also true. And so the first thing we did was we flew down to, like, when we decided like let's do this and this is where we're going to do it, we flew down to Medellin and we just started hitting up everyone. Like we found a telegram for like Medellin meetup, and we just hit those people up and asked anyone who wants to go out to dinner, we want to take you out to dinner. And then we hooked up with the guy from Lightning Coffee. I don't know if you know Jose, Lightning Coffee.
No.
No, you've never heard of Lightning
No.
Coffee. So he sells coffee for Bitcoin.
Nice.
He's Colombian. He's got a little place where they produce the coffee, and so it's called Lightning Coffee. You'll have to look him up.
Nice.
He's a great dude. He ships all over the world. So not to be on here shilling, but he actually, when he found out we were doing it, he basically told me like it's been my dream ever since I became a Bitcoiner for there to be a conference here in my city.
Wow.
And so he was like, whatever I can do to help you. So those first like 4 days we spent in Medellin, he literally spent like every waking hour like at my side, just because I don't speak Spanish either. So it made it even more difficult. But he just translated everything for me, just hung out with me, helped me,
Awesome.
everything. And then we met with all the Bitcoiners down there in Medellin that we could. And everybody kind of said, like, go for it, go for it. And the facility gave me a great deal. Like, it's really affordable. It was like the best facility to have a conference in Medellin, probably in the country. And real state of the art type of place. And they gave us a good deal. And then in the end, they actually let us move to a little bit smaller of an area. And because we, like you, we actually planned for bigger. Right. And then when we didn't have quite the numbers that we needed, they actually had an area that was, quite frankly, not way smaller, but just slightly smaller, and it saved us a good chunk of money. So
that's nice.
anyway, we did that. But yeah, so that's kind of how we decided, or why we decided. That was like the motivating factors of why we decided to do it.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then like it was amazing. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, we of course we got a lot of pretty big name people. I was able to take so much from what I do every day, planning like basically what you would consider like club basketball tournaments here in the US, but like big ones where there's like 20 games going on at one time, right? And
Yeah.
it's at a convention center. So I kind of took a lot of what we do here to plan an event and tried to use it there. And one of those things is like the first thing we do, right? The most two important things we do when we run an event here for basketball are we find a facility that can accommodate, that can accommodate us, that's like as nice of a facility as we can get, right? Because it matters. Like people don't want to go spend 2 days in a dump or
Of
3 days
course.
in a
On
dumpy,
plastic chairs.
crappy little place. Yeah, they want something like you. So you just try to go get a really nice facility and, and hope it can, it's big enough for what you need. And so, and then the other thing you do is you go find like one or two really marquee teams and you kind of tell them like, hey, what do we got to do to make this happen? Do we got to get, a couple hotel rooms for your coaching staff? Do we have to waive the entry fee for your team to play in the tournament and even give you a little bit of money, maybe $3,000, $4,000, whatever. And then, because then we can go to every other team and say, these guys are playing in it. Are you interested in playing? Do you want to compete against them? And a lot of our tournaments, what they're for is for college coaches to go evaluate whether players are good enough to get a scholarship, right? So the people want to play the best team so that their players get scouted. So hopefully they get scholarships. And so, here I was kind of thought it was the same thing. Like we have to go get someone that like is really a big name person in Bitcoin that people really respect, that people really want to listen to, because that's what's going to drive attendance. Like I can't drive attendance. No one knows me. I'm not like a prominent Bitcoiner at this point, right?
So who was the big name? Was it Jeff Booth that you got on first?
Yeah, Jeff was the very first
What's
person.
the story, if you mind sharing? How did you get Jeff on?
Yeah, well, so, a couple things worked in my favor that I didn't know at the time, but like, Jeff and George Gammon, and I don't know if you know George
I know
Gammon,
George Gammon,
he's not necessarily a Bitcoiner. So I think he's really coming around though. And Jeff met with him for like 2 hours in Medellin. And he told me like, I think George is very close, if not there, to being on board with like why Bitcoin. Because I think George, and not to go off on this tangent, but I think George keeps going back to like, I tried to trade Bitcoin for goods and services in Argentina, and I couldn't do it. People didn't want it. They wanted dollars
or USDT.
But I think he's starting to, yeah. And so I think now he's coming around to like, well, but yes, but that's right now it's because they don't understand Bitcoin. That's why they don't want it. And they want dollars because they understand dollars. But like, so he's coming around, I think, on his reasoning. But so Jeff, yeah. So we just contacted Jeff, but so him and George are friends, and at that time I didn't even know that George lived there, and that and that's kind of eventually how we got George on board, was that he was going to get to be up there with Jeff. So worked out really good. And that was a really big time segment, obviously. But so I just reached out to Jeff, and he got back to me pretty much right away and just said, yeah, he was interested and that he had an agent to talk to his agent. I talked to her and we kind of got all the details worked out, very similar to the basketball world of negotiating with a team that, is going to come to your event and help you. And so, so he was willing to do it. I think Jeff also is really like on board with kind of like the underdog and like, the little guy and helping the people out, who kind of need it. And which is a great quality to have. So like, not to say that he's not speaking at like the big events, the super big ones, but, he told me that he was pretty limiting to, he kind of had to limit himself because he gets asked to speak at every single thing.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I just can't do it. And so, and I, I don't want to, I guess there's some of the story that I don't want to tell, but, essentially like, and not that it's bad in any way. It's just, I don't think that it's my place to talk about maybe some of the Jeff side of
course,
maybe why he wanted to do it or whatever. So, but like, or why he was willing to, but, like, I think, no, I mean, it was, thankfully he was, and, we then went around and, of course, trumpeted that to every potential speaker and attendee that we could. And I think it was really a motivating factor for us getting other, legit speakers on board. I think it lent some credibility, and then, in fairness to every speaker, like kudos to them and Jeff for kind of taking a flyer, on me, because they don't know me and they never had worked with me before. And so, and thankfully, knock on wood, everything really came together. I think, and again, this goes out to, my team, and the speakers, the attendees, everyone. And, I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back here. I want that to certainly be acknowledged. Like this is more of a thank you to them, but like the event went extremely well. It could not have went any better, I don't think. There was very few things we could have done better, I think, overall. Like there were things that we can improve upon, but
Always.
in light of like our circumstances, like one of the things we can improve upon, right, is we should have two stages. One should be Spanish the entire time,
Mm,
and one should be, a combination of English and Spanish. Or the Spanish one like doesn't have to be going when we have Spanish speakers on the main stage, but then
hmm.
when we have English speakers on the main stage, we should have a secondary stage with Spanish speakers. And we should also provide, one thing we didn't do this year was we didn't provide headsets like the ones you have on right now,
Yeah,
where people could listen in
and
their language.
translated.
So if you're Spanish and you didn't speak English, like I'm sorry you didn't get to understand what Jeff was saying,
Yeah,
right? Or the other people who spoke in English. And conversely, like if you were American or Canadian and you didn't speak Spanish, then you didn't really get to hear some really good ones that were in Spanish. And I guess what? I'm in that boat.
yeah.
So we would love to have had that. It's just we tried so hard to get that piece worked out this year, and financially we couldn't justify it. Like the
Mm,
price for the amount of people that we knew were going to need it just didn't correlate to making financial sense.
of
So
course.
we knew we were going to let some people down there, right? But we didn't really have a choice, and I think we can fix that next year. Same with like the Spanish content for the entirety of the conference. Like this year it wasn't a big enough conference, and plus I also wanted to like
Start
make it
small. Don't go
really,
too huge, right?
yeah, I didn't want to divide people's
Mm,
attention. So I wanted there just to be one stage this year so that everyone was in one room and there was one thing going on, and there wasn't like this division. We didn't make you make a choice this year. There was no like I have to make a choice between this or that. There was just this. So I don't feel bad about doing that, but that is a place we can improve, right? So we can make it better. So aside from the headphone thing, like, and I would say the only other thing I thought we didn't do particularly well, especially the second day, was that we ran over time,
mm.
probably by like almost an hour for the whole day. I mean, that's not terrible to go over
But
60 minutes
everything
on
gets
a.
pushed over. Speakers are like, when am I coming on? When there's a lot of
Yeah, and I did, and I
barriers to
felt
move.
really bad for the last two groups. There was like a panel, and then like I don't even want to call it a keynote, but we had a guy get up there and do like speak by himself, and they had a very small audience. Most
Mm.
people had said sayonara at that point. So I felt a little bit bad for the lack of attendance of those two groups for sure, and I promised them obviously better times next year if they come back and forgive me for that. But so next year I think we talked about maybe having like a countdown clock so that's facing the speaker so they can see that as they
That's a
speak and
good
they
point.
know what their time is, and then assign someone. This year we assigned someone to be like the speaker liaison between the speakers and getting them up, like getting them organized to go up on stage, making sure they had mics that were ready and all that stuff.
Mm.
And next year I said, let's just have two people. Let's have a person who's in charge of getting the speakers organized, and then a person who's in charge of time,
Just time
who's
management.
just
Yeah,
time manager.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. So, but other than that, I thought we absolutely killed it. Like the speaker lineup was tremendous. I mean, there were so many people that have, I go online and look. I mean, and again, not to say that you're like your Twitter following is the be all end all of how good of a speaker you'll be,
Mm.
or how influential of like you are to like how many what your reach is to people. But I thought we had so many people that had large Twitter followings, people that are well, like you get that because you're respected, right? Or you're a total idiot, one or the other, right? I mean, if you're a total idiot, you probably have a large following too, because people know you'll just say anything. But otherwise, like you have a large following because you're probably respected. So yeah, I thought we had a great lineup of people, and it all went very smoothly. A number of the speakers told me like they felt like it was a second or third year conference,
Mm.
which I think, again, a testament to the people we had working with us. We had a group called Creative Network run by a guy named Atlas. He's a guy who American Hodl basically memed to a full coin back in 2020.
That's
A
not the
young
BTC
dude.
cards atlas. That's another atlas.
It's another Atlas,
Okay.
yes. So he's a Colombian guy, runs a basically like a creative group. Like they do, graphics.
Nice.
They did all the production for us. They did the streaming for us. They like did a bunch of social media stuff for us. So they do all that. They did the website for us. So they did a bunch of the stuff. And then another guy that I absolutely have to talk about. So there's a gentleman, a digital nomad, a guy named by the name of Rainier Nanquil. He lives in Medellin a lot, but he's from California. He hit me up out of the blue one day and just said, I want to volunteer for this. Like, I'm
Nice.
interested in helping you. And I was like, at the time, I'm like, hey, I need the help like really bad. So I was like, dude, you're on. And he called me the next day and we kind of went over. He was like, well, what do you need to run this conference? And I literally went soup to nuts. Like, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. And he made a list of everything on a Google Doc. And then basically him and I, and mostly him, just crossed a lot of that stuff off because a lot of it was stuff where you needed to be on the ground in Medellin and I wasn't. So he went and did everything. But between Atlas and Creative Network and his group, and Rainier and his group, and in my staff, the people who work with me all the time on basketball events, who were helping me on the ground, my wife, my assistant Kayla, like these guys just killed it. Everything went really smoothly. We had a bunch of satellite events. I think the attendees would say we got them the information about like when events were, when things were going to be. It was all up to date and accurate. We got them information about all the satellite events. The satellite events were amazing. Yeah, so I mean, I'm super pleased. I think everyone who came was super pleased. I had one guy kind of tell me he was kind of disappointed. It was more of a gringo conference than, there wasn't as many Colombians there as he would have liked. And, and I told him, like, again, we agree that's an area for improvement. We want them to come, but like at the end of the day, like, look, we had to get this thing off the ground. I've never run a Bitcoin event before. I've never run an event outside the United States before. As an American, that's kind of a scary thing. Just because, I think Americans are spoiled and, we know how things work here. And so like we're probably a little more protected in doing things in terms of like contracts and, things getting done more further in advance and stuff like that. But, and then not speaking Spanish myself, like we had a lot of hurdles that we overcame and, I think it went really, really well. So, hopefully the plan is to, when we're already trying to get things like get up and running to start going for next year.
I was going to say it's going to
So
be an
yeah.
annual event, right? Is it going to stick to January or the dates will be varied?
Yeah, no, I'd like to stick to January. I mean, I'd like
Kick
to
off the
keep as
year.
much the same as possible. People ask me, are we going to move it around? And I'm like, no, I mean, like, I want to stick in Medellin. I love that city. And I think every person who came, I mean, I heard 4 or 5 different people talk to me about like maybe like spending time, not necessarily moving permanently to Medellin, but
Yeah.
like I had one guy tell me his lease is up on his house and he's like, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I think I might just come down here for like 4 or 5 months
Nice.
until I figure it out. So yeah, I definitely heard about people that are going to go down there and kind of do some time down there, and it's a really amazing place. So yeah, so that's kind of the plan.
Amazing. And one of the locals who lives there, Oliver Velez, which I've been a big fan of on X. Unfortunately, since we hit 100K, he left us. He's departed. His job's done after so many years. But it was
Yeah, I
amazing
thought he
seeing
came
him
back.
being there and being listed as one of the speakers. I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, that's amazing.
Yeah, he was incredible. No, listen, he was awesome. I want to say, and listen, I know it's hard. There's so much content out there to consume nowadays. It's hard to like find time to to listen or watch anything. But definitely, our stuff is, and I can probably send it to you. We're going to be posting it again, but like his keynote on the first day, right before Jeff Booth. And I love Jeff, and Jeff was amazing. Jeff was absolutely incredible. Like I couldn't talk highly enough of Jeff and what he did for us at this conference. But if I had to give out an MVP for
That
one
was the
talk, it
highlight.
would be Oliver's talk. Was unbelievably good. It was maybe the most compelling talk I've ever heard at a conference.
Wow.
And
I need to check
it
it
just
out.
was extremely compelling. So you'll have to check it out. It's about a 45-50 minute talk. And extremely compelling. I mean, talks about like basically we are all slaves on with a, like every country is basically like a slave owner, and we're like just living on the plantation. And he equated it to things like, look, even if you pay your house off in full, right? If you pay your house off, if you don't pay the tax on your
Gets
property,
taken away.
they're still going to come take your house. So you're just living there. You don't really own that. So I mean, he just was making a case like, Bitcoin is something that you can totally fully own, like that no one can take from you. It was just really compelling, very compelling. And Oliver is also a very compelling speaker as well, as you probably know from listening to him, and a very passionate speaker, which makes people compelling and also entertaining.
And
So
energy, I'm
no,
sure, like I see him, like I used to watch him like nearly daily online, but like I can just imagine being in the same room with him presenting, like you must feel the energy in the room.
yeah. He was actually on a panel. This is great. He was on a panel as well. And every time he started speaking, he would jump up we had these like big cushiony, big cushiony chairs and a big cushiony couch up there. And every time he started speaking, first of all, he couldn't fully sit back in the chair no matter who was speaking. And then every time he started speaking, he jumped up out of the chair and every time would say like, oh, I hope you don't mind if I stand up while I talk. I just, because he has so much energy. It was incredible, yeah, to watch
Amazing.
him. He was awesome. He is great. He's an advocate that we need in the space. So it was great to have.
Amazing. So apart from Oliver, what's like another big highlight, so to say, for you personally from this year's event?
Yeah, I mean, well, listen. Okay, so this, again, just this kind of going to your story about your first conference, very similar. So, like, at one point here, and again, not to like just put all my business out there, but I'm a kind of an open book, way more of an open book than I probably should be. I'm sure my wife would say, but like at one point, probably like 3 weeks before the conference, we were probably 20 grand in the hole, right? I mean,
Mm,
like so many people bought tickets at the last minute. I mean, people walked up but we sold a ton of tickets, people walking up and buying them at the door.
wow.
But so like we were 20 grand in the hole about 2 or 3 weeks before the conference. And so at one point I was trying to tell myself like, it's okay, dude. Like if you lose 20 grand on this, like it's okay. Like, you tried your best, and just look at it as like you're taking your entire family on a vacation to Colombia. And in the midst of that, you're going to get to go to like your own personal Bitcoin conference where you're going to be like the celebrity VIP. Like all the
Nice way to think of
speakers are
it.
going to talk to you. And I'm like, just look at it like you're just an average person, but everyone's going to cater to you. Would you spend 20 grand on that? Like, that's a lot. And then as the kind of like the next week went on and people started buying more tickets and more revenue started kind of coming in and we started inching closer, I started being like, would I pay 10 grand for that? Yeah, I'd pay 10 grand for that. That'd be worth 10 grand. I totally pay 10 grand to go like be able to hang out with Jeff and Oliver and like
Yeah.
every day, like chat with them and like pick their brains one on one and uninterrupted. Like I'd probably pay 10 grand for that. So then as we kept inching closer, I'm like, wow, this is turning into a pretty good value here. But so yeah, by the end, we actually got to the point where we broke even. So that was a huge highlight for me,
Yeah.
is that like, listen, the biggest highlight for me was like, just imagine like getting all of like, and maybe not every single one, but a bunch of your favorite Bitcoiners together to have a conference and like you're the ultimate VIP.
And you're on
That's what it was.
holiday. You're not in your backyard. You're like in
Yeah, and I'm
Medellin,
on
right?
vacation with my family in a beautiful
Amazing.
city where there's so many like tourist amazing things to do. Oh yeah, I'm like, that's how I'm kind of looking at this,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
to try to be positive about it, because 20 grand in the hole isn't a positive thing. But then as we inched close, so that was my highlight, getting
Nice.
to break even and being like looking at the experience from that perspective. Perspective changes so much. So right, I mean, that's kind of how I kind of looked at it. And then I'm like, wow, this is a really amazing thing. The last day there was actually a satellite, not the last day, the day after the conference, there was a satellite event called run by a girl named Anuja from she's runs a thing called Travel with Bitcoin is her company. So she organized a tour and to a place called Guadape, which is this huge rock and this unbelievable. It's like sits in the middle of this huge, unbelievable lake that's like goes in all these different directions. It's really beautiful. You'll have to look up Guadape if you've never heard of it. So she organized this trip there, and so the trip was just like five families or four families basically, or couples, and so one of those was my family, and then one of them was Jeff's family. So like it was amazing. Like you got to spend all Sunday hanging out with Jeff Booth and his family. Like that's, for your average Bitcoiner, like that's an
That's the
incredible
dream.
day. So yeah, that was my highlight, was that we were able to do the whole thing, and it didn't, like we broke even, and I just got to have this incredible experience.
Amazing. Well, John, once again, congrats on pulling it out. It's definitely, I can tell you, I've been in those shoes. I know what it feels like, but this is even crazier because it's in another country. It's much bigger, things at stake. Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to hear, and I'm sure the listeners listening kind of got the energy with it, and I'm for sure this is something that they will consider joining next year, and hopefully in every year going forward. I will
For
also
sure.
try.
If I could just say this one thing,
Yeah.
like to me, like even in the beginning, like even when we were at the end, when I'm like, hey, this is gonna lose a bunch of money, but we're at least gonna get it off the ground. And then once we got to the conference and it was breaking even, and we were like, wow, this is amazing, this is amazing. I was like the whole time, like, I know this is gonna really work moving forward, because like we didn't have proof of work.
Yeah.
And now we have proof of results. So, which is even better than proof of work, right? Because if you do the work and there's no results, it doesn't matter. I think
That's
Knut said
Knut's. I
that.
was gonna say that's Knut's words right there.
So anyway, like when he told me that, I'm like, wow, that really makes sense, right? That like really makes sense. So we have proof of results. So now I think, like, how many people, like, would you really fly all the way for? I mean, and there were people who did, and I appreciate those people so much for believing in something. But like as a Bitcoiner, I also like understand, like, don't trust, verify. Well, now you can verify. Like we did this. It's on YouTube. It's on Twitter. Like it's the archives are there. Like we put this conference on. It was a huge success. We have proof of results now. So like now no one has to be nervous. Like if and also, like, I heard a lot of people say like the OPSEC is bad. Like Medellín is a scary place. Like now we have, like, all these people came to Medellín. Everyone had a great experience, a safe experience. It was wonderful. And now it is for everyone else who was maybe a little bit tentative or hesitant for, I'm scared to go to Medellin. I don't know if it'll really happen. I've never heard of this guy. He might rug me. You know what I mean? Like all these things people could have said. I even heard in the beginning one time our website looks scammy. So like all those like things are gone now, right? Like proof of work eliminates all those things. So they're all gone, and people should definitely feel comfortable coming to Medellin in this conference in the future.
No, for sure. I've been, if I'm sure you've been a listener of the show, John, you know that I'm a big proponent of pushing people to go to conferences, because there's one thing of you reading the books, going on Bitcoin Twitter, listening to all Bitcoin podcasts, but going actually to the conference and engaging with other people, not just the keynotes. Mostly when I go to conferences, I hardly get time to listen to any keynotes. I watch those keynotes at home on the couch, like in my own comfort. But at the conference, I'm just there at the expo hall, at the different, after events, satellite events, just like networking, sharing things with ideas, meeting new people, reconnecting with Bitcoiners. It's just a magical feeling. I highly suggest people should consider to putting Bitcoin Medellin on their calendar of future Bitcoin events, because as much as there's new events, like we get more or less, especially with Bitcoin Magazine, they're kind of this above and beyond event, and then you have like the OG ones, such as the BitBlock Boom and the Honey Badger in Riga, like one of the oldest ones, which that's much more smaller scale, and that's more kind of like dev like centric than everybody. But it's nice to have something new and fresh, and something that's kind of in line, at least for me, with kind of the morals of, like, I have nothing against people trading ordinals, but like I couldn't give like two fucks about it. Like I'm not gonna go to a conference to listen to some guys dressed as wizards telling me, like, that's not my cup of tea. So like I would much rather go and hear about, like, how do we build this free new world? that's why I'm doing what I'm doing here and trying to help people. So yeah, I will try perhaps next year to come and take my family, because to me, it's also like, I want to go to more conferences as a wolf pack, like take my wife, take the girls, go explore. And yeah, like I've never been to I've never been to any Latin American country. And like, there is definitely El Salvador. Like, I heard so many good things about it, and I was planning to go to adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador, but unfortunately I couldn't, because I was still doing I was gonna go for the halving party, right? But I was still in my
Right.
fiat mine. I ran out of those days, and just mentally I wasn't there. Like, I just couldn't. It wasn't the right time for me. But now that I'm fully working on myself, I'm definitely, this summer I'm going back to BTC Prague, which was my personal favorite Bitcoin event of all time, and I love the team.
I'm going to go this year. We
Yeah,
will
well,
see
I'll
each
see
other.
you there, John. There'll be some drinks and food on me, and yeah, I mean, BTC Prague was just incredible. Like, there was a lot of people. They said there was around like 10,000. I don't know if it was 10,000 or not, but like, it was a lot of people. But like, the fact
That's
the
great.
expo hall was like where everybody was at. There was over like 100 like exhibits of Bitcoin only companies. No shitcoin. There was the only shitcoinery was a ledger booth, which was empty all the time. But apart from the ledger booth, everything was packed. It was
Nice.
amazing. BTC, and just Prague as a city. And unfortunately, I only had one day to spend. It was a Sunday, because I flew in. It was Wednesday night, and Thursday was the dev day. And then Friday was the actual industry day. And then 2 days over the weekend, the actual. So it was like a 4 day, like towards the fourth day, the like official second day, I was already drained, because it was like full day there. And then these after parties, which were incredible, hanging out
Yes.
with, there was a cypherpunk boat with Max Hillebrand, and Calais was there. And it was just like, it was amazing. Like,
That's
roasting like
awesome.
barbecues on a boat. Like, it was special. And I was like, poof, after this experience, every summer I'm going back to Prague. And I want to take also, so Prague's one of them, but other places, like, I would love to take my whole family with it, and have a vacation plus enjoy some time there, potentially also
Yes.
contribute. We'll see. I've offered to BTC Prague if they want me to moderate a panel on self-custody, which I think is super important. I know, like, I'm willing to contribute, correct? Or a panel in Medellín, and any other, Bitcoin only conference that's listening to this pod. If you want some self-custody keynotes or paneling, Gigi's more than happy to contribute. So like, I want to engage as well on that part. So yeah, I'm really happy everything I heard, and I'm really happy we got a chance to meet John, and I'm super
Absolutely.
excited to meet you in person in a few months in Prague. I don't know if you've been to
Yeah.
Prague, if this is going to be
Never.
that city is like, and I'm going to spend a little bit, I'll take a few extra days. So do the
Me too.
conference and go around the city, because it's like, it's magical. Like, the architecture there, you'll see it's something special. And Prague has a deep history with Bitcoin, like from slash pool to Trezor to the BIP. What is it, 39? Or like, they go way back. Like, there's a lot of like hardcore OG Bitcoin ventures that started there. So it's an awesome place. So yeah,
Great.
it's nice to see new things coming onto the space. I'm always, as I always say, I'm more than happy to help any way I can to spear forward everything, because if we help out each other, we all win. This is the difference between Bitcoin and the legacy markets. In legacy market, there's always someone wins and someone loses. When someone sells high, that guy is buying it high and the price is dropping. But in Bitcoin, there is no someone loses out. Everybody's winning. So, but most importantly is, knowing what you're doing, and, doing the right thing, not just, for a quick buck, come in, come out, and then get ruined. But I think this is a nice transition to kind of to round it up. As you know, John, to all the guests, I asked them, what is one piece of advice, or let's say key message about Bitcoin you want to leave our listeners with today?
Yeah, I would just say get off zero. Anyone, and your listeners, probably most of them probably are off zero. But
I hope so.
for anyone that they love and that they know, like, help them get off zero. Sometimes you have to do it for them. This year, I bought all my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother. I bought them all 1,000,000 sats for Christmas,
Oh my God,
and
nice.
taught them how to self custody. I told them they had to spend 20 minutes with me learning how to self custody their own funds. And because I tried and tried and tried, and I couldn't get them to move. And so I finally did it myself.
Nice.
So I would just say get off zero, and any of your loved ones, help them get off zero. because time is running out that people will be able to get off zero. That soon people will not be able to get off zero. So
that's awesome advice. And yeah, just to add in, like, just in a mere few years, it would be crazy to think like, wow, you gifted a million sats to every family member for Christmas. Like, how rich are you? Like, and you know, it's insane. Like, as you said, the boat is leaving the docks, so you better start onboarding yourself and your loved ones ASAP. But as I don't want to shill anymore, but I'll do the last shill. If you need help, Gigi's here to help you get on board. But yeah, once again, John, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Once again, congrats on a fantastic, your Genesis event of Bitcoin Medellin.
yeah,
Best of luck with the planning of next year's one. Hopefully, I'll be able to join and perhaps even contribute by moderating a panel. Let's see.
awesome.
And where can we send our listeners to keep up with everything and follow you? I guess, are you on X personally, or?
Yeah, we are on X. Personally, I'm not. I
Okay,
just have my
everything's
event business
Bitcoin
on
Medellin.
one, and then the Twitter for this is BTC Medellin CONF. So BTC Medellin Conf, and that's where you can find us on Twitter. Yeah, that's where we mostly are.
Perfect. Well, guys, go over, check out X, give him a follow, support John and the team with the incredible work that they're doing. Thanks again, John, for giving us your valuable time to come on and share here. It was a blast. I look forward to having you back in the future. And as I said, I look forward to meeting you in person just in a few months' time at BTC Prague.
Yeah.
By the way, a shill for BTC Prague. Anyone listening, you better go get your tickets because early bird prices are running out. And if you want to get a 10% discount, you can use BTC Story discount code and you get a 10% discount and you get to hang out with Gigi, John, and many of your favorite Bitcoiners. So hopefully see you all in Prague. And John, all the best and speak to you soon, my friend.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit too. Your support keeps us going, and we appreciate it. See you in the next one.